Come get your brand new Imperial Guard or Astra Militarium mind blowers.
Spiking bits.
What's up, hobby maniacs? Baer with you again today for our, I guess, almost semi-infrequent, almost bi-weekly or bi-monthly, I guess. Sometimes tri-monthly, geez. What I'm getting to is welcome to our tips and tactics video for the new Codex Astra Militarium. Now, I guess staying in line with kind of what we have out there is this isn't going to be a whole, hey, look at all these changes and everything, because, well, there's a lot of videos already on that. But what this is going to be is giving you some ideas on some of the things that I think are important that you should know about the new Imperial Guard book or Astra Militarium book. And also, I've got maybe four factions or regiments that I think are important to talk about, and also some army list ideas, multiple army list ideas in some cases for said factions for you to field. Now, overall, you're probably like, well, that was a really long-winded speech. Thanks. I'm glad we're already a minute in and now you're actually talking about something. What the heck do you even think about this book? Well, let me tell you. So this book is probably the best codex that's come out so far for Warhammer 40k. It's incredibly synergetic. There's so much stuff in here that allows you to customize your armies. I mean, you want to run all tanks, you can do that and be mostly competitive and awesome on the tabletop. You want to run all infantry. You literally have that many guardsmen sitting around that you want to field. Hey, you can do that too, and you'll actually be pretty good at it. You want to combo in, some stuff like you want to throw Guildmane in here, which isn't a bad idea in any way, shape, or fashion. You can do that too and still be competitive because he's got that dope Imperials bubble. He can do so much stuff. Like, this book can accompany any Imperial army out there and you can have a blast. It can also stand alone and you can have a blast. It's really cool. It's really resilient and it's so full of awesome 40k background and just fluff that it's just gonna be a fan favorite. I mean, Guard has always been a fan favorite, but I don't see how it won't be from now on. Now, I know you're thinking, well, hey, Robbie B, I heard Guard was really, really, really good, and all these people at the top tables at all these tournaments in 2017 and 8th edition are spamming all this stuff. Did they fix it? Well, sort of. Just again on a soapbox real quick, it's my personal opinion that the fixes to conscripts really aren't going to change much. Most of the lists that I include here and I talk about are going to include some number of conscripts. I think the fact that they tried to throttle them back was admirable, but at the end of the day, most of the top lists were running 30 conscripts already with a commissar, and you can still do that. And there's no reason not to do that. As a matter of fact, there's a relic in here for the Valhallans that mimics. It's like a free commissar, and it's a free. And relics are basically free unless you spend a command point to get more, or multiples depending on what you want to do there. So it's basically a free commissar. I feel like the Valhallans are basically like the Gladius of 8th edition 40k, because you get so much stuff for free that you don't have to pay for, and so many different abilities that you don't have to pay for, that you're really getting a lot more value out of an infantry or even tank base, because we're going to talk about that. They're incredibly resilient. Now, I realize I haven't talked about the book per se and all these changes and things. You're probably like, hey, let's cover some stuff. So we'll get into it. Suffice to say that I think some of the things I'm going to talk about will kind of blow your mind in certain ways. Like, everybody's on with the Catachans, everybody's on with the Cadians, but I actually think the superstars of this book are the Tallarns, and we're going to talk about that as we go forward and talk about some army lists as well. Now, first off, some stuff you need to know right off the bat. So you got regiment keywords, which is super simple. Like, hey, if you want to take infantry, they're going to have a regiment keyword. Your detachment basically has to be all of the same regiment keyword if you want to benefit from cool stuff like doctrines and stratagems. Well, actually, stratagems only work if you just have Astra Militarium in here, which leads us to another thing, as we saw with the Death Guard FAQ recently, that even if you have a Death Guard detachment, if you have a Chaos Space Marine detachment, you still get access to this Chaos Space Marine stratagems based on that Chaos Space Marine detachment that you put in there. And If they benefit Chaos Space Marines, well, Death Guard are Chaos Space Marines too. So everything kind of plays together. So you're going to see more and more of that as we go forward. Certain stratagems in here are keyed to Astra Militarium or keyed to Cadian or keyed, keyword things. So you want to make sure, for the most part, that you're rocking detachments, you're rocking the same regiment, so you can take advantage of not just the order system, but your doctrines and your stratagems. So regiments, you either nominate it or it's set for you. In the case of, say, Pask is Cadian, but you can take a tank commander and be like, this tank commander is Valhallan, cool. All right, that's how that works. Then we've got the dope order system, and orders haven't changed from the index book whatsoever. So you've got your order system right here, boom, that didn't change, but boom, we've got brand new regimental orders, which can only be issued by a commander with a certain regimental keyword. So that's where all this stuff kind of starts to come in, and we'll talk about those later. But there's some good ones in here, there's some bad ones in here. We'll get kind of through it all kind of as we go. My personal favorite is, you know what? I probably have to say Tallarn's my personal favorite, just because I think it's so good. And I was playing Cadian tank, but now I think I'm going to go Tallarn tank. Although I haven't completely penned it all out yet. I think they're super strong. And who doesn't like to push a bunch of tanks around the table and go pew, 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 and then go fast? Like, they have the ability to be Eldar battle focused. That seems really good. I'll take that. Thanks, guys. Whoever made this book, well, they did a really good job, in my opinion. And there isn't anything that seems to contradict anything either. Just the fact that you have to read stuff multiple times to completely process it, because you're like, wait, did that just say what I think it said? And ooh, holy crap, it did. Okay, so that's the regimental stuff, the regimental orders. Grinding advance, you probably already heard, changed. If you move up to half your speed with your Leman Russ, you can double fire shots out of the main turret weapon. Turret weapons defined here, easy peasy lemon squeezy. It's not gonna apply over to anything like shadow swords or anything dope like that. Since I just flipped to the tank commander section and pass section, let's talk about something in here that a lot of folks didn't talk about. Now, I've digested all the videos out there just like you guys, but unfortunately, not everybody has the time to really dig into this book as much as some of us have after these videos come out, because I don't have to tell you what points changed and what changed here, because people have already made 5 videos about that to this point. But what I can tell you is I've read this, I've studied this based off the other videos, and I can give you my expert opinion. But let's be honest, sometimes things are just wrong. Like, no matter how much we study and how much we read up on these books, 40K is basically a college level class at this point. So there's no perfect game of 40K. There's no perfect tips and tactics review. It's just pretty much impossible given all the variables. So if we say something incorrect or we misspeak in here, hey, just drop it in the comments so that we can help everybody learn these rules together, instead of being like, you're stupid, you have a stupid face, Rob, why do you even make these videos? Well, people watch them, so that's why we make them. Yes, I might have a stupid face from time to time, but I am 100% okay with it. So there you go. All right, so one thing that changed in here that's definitely worth mentioning from the index is the tank commander. And you're probably like, wait, what are you talking about? Well, here, I'll show you. So tank orders have 2 different entries, one in the old index and one in here. And as you remember, Pask was actually FAQ'd, so he couldn't issue an order to himself because he was a character, but they omitted this line here that says, though the unit you picked cannot be a character, for the tank commander. So they FAQ Pask to match this. Now in the new book, that line is not in here on Pask or the tank commander. So I almost feel like they took it out, which to me says, hey, tank commanders can issue orders to other tank commanders, or tank commanders can actually issue orders to even Pask, or Pask can issue tank orders to himself now, which I'm definitely okay with, because it just seemed kind of silly that Pask, the knight commander, the sword of Cadia himself, couldn't tell the guys downstairs driving the tank to, hey, go faster, or that gunner to, hey, shoot that exposed, weld rivet right over there, which just seemed completely silly. So I'm hoping that's the case, because a lot of the things I talk about in our army list are based off the assumption that tank commanders can issue orders to tank commanders. Why? Well, it's just simple math. 3-up ballistic skill with the ability to reroll 1s from a command, which is your tank commands right here, is just ridiculous math. You don't see math like that much in 40K. Most of the top, like, air quotes broken stuff in the format right now isn't even that good. you've got stuff like Mortarion and Magnus and Guilliman that do hit on 2s, reroll 1s. You don't have much in this game that hits on 3s, reroll 1s. And the ability to get some sort of equalizer with the amount of firepower these tanks can put out now using the grinding advance rule is very much something that you have to pay attention to in this day and age. So I just wanted to mention that to y'all because that is what I based a lot of my breakdown of my tips and tactics on in here. All right, let's flip through this a little bit more, get to some special rules. There's some other cool stuff in here that changed. Let's just do a brief flip through. So the Valkyries got the ability to, if they go into hover, they can fire. Basilisks are really cool, and you probably already know this, but the Earthshaker is now -3. For 100 points, the Basilisk is, if you don't have access to some of the Forge World stuff, Basilisk is definitely worth thinking about putting in your army. Vehicle squadron of 3, very cool stuff there. The Leman Russ battle tanks got better, and all the battle tanks got better. Grinding advance, now they're 122 base, I believe 147 base. Yes, 147. It's 45. Commander's 45 points more, so it's 167 for the Commanders. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't done this, you might want to think about doing it because it's super annoying when I'm trying to point stuff up. I just took a screenshot of the back, the points and everything with my phone, and then just printed it on my computer. And I didn't even have to go to Kinko's or anything. It turns out we all have a scanner in our pocket these days. And then printed these out so that I can have like a quick reference when I'm looking at something. And I'm making an army list, I'll just have this set down next to me or, you know, flipped up on the desk right there. And I can just go through and point things. Or, you know, you can write in your book, which you've seen me do in the past. But, that was just something I was thinking about there. Baneblades went down 40 points, or the Baneblade chassis rather. The Baneblade cannon went up to heavy 3d3, which pretty much makes the shadows and the Shadow Sword changed to 3d3 instead of 3d6 on the Baneblade cannon, 3d6 rather. Shadow Sword is 3d3 for the Volcano cannon, which pretty much makes it worth taking over the Bane Sword now, which was kind of what I was looking at. I was like, why would you even take the Volcano cannon at that point when the Bane Sword is, at first glance a lot better with its Quake cannon? And then I was like, oh, okay, well now you give us a reason, because it's actually an average of 6 now instead of a random guess of maybe 4. So there's all that. Then you get to the armory section. And by the way, something that a lot of folks have missed, there's this other war gear section right here that you can actually equip your Leman Russes and things with. So you got track guards, dozer blades, and the auger array. 10 points, 5 points, and 10 points for the track guard. And there's the explanation on what they do. A vehicle with track guards always counts as having a starting number of wounds when determining its move characteristic. For 10 points, I don't feel like it's worth it, for the Leman Russ at least. I don't think you're actually able to take this on a Shadow Sword. The Baneblade, or the Dozer Blade, seems pretty good, because you can add 1 to hit rolls for the unit until the end of the ensuing fight phase, but it's only 5 points, and to be quite honest, even though stuff like a Leman Russ might be strength 8 in assault, it's still doing 1 damage with no AP, and you still have to roll its normal, weapon skill to hit. The Augur Array for 10 points is basically 1 reroll a single failed hit roll for a vehicle with the Augur Array. It could come in handy, but it's basically paying for a free reroll for 10 points. And you gotta ask yourself at the end of the day, is it worth doing? Will you remember it? But if you can do both of these things and you got an extra 10 points, hey, it might be worth taking. So there is a few other war gears that you need to worry about. The explanation and the points cost are going to be in your points section in the back of the book under other war gear, which I think is one of these pages right here. I don't know. I think it's the left one. So there's other war gear. There's Bullgun Parades, Medipacks, Platoon Standards, the works. It's all in here. So make sure you check those out. So there are some upgrades for vehicles, which is really neat to see. Then we get into the Regimental Doctrine section. You can see I've already made some notes to myself here. The big thing about Doctrines is that the detachments all have to be the same keyword. We already kind of talked about that. Except for, and then Doctrines don't work if you take a super heavy auxiliary detachment. The same with the trait system for Space Marines. The same with the Legion thing in the Chaos Space Marine book. So if you slot in a Lord of War and you don't get it in like a Supreme Command or something, you're not going to benefit from Doctrines. And that's why it's really important in this particular instance, because if you're going to take Tallarn and you really want your super heavies to benefit from some of this stuff here, like the Titanic vehicle section of this doctrine right here, you're going to make sure you want to put them into a detachment that is not auxiliary, otherwise they do not benefit from this. So double check that, double check your buddies, but just to make sure you're doing it right. And then of course, Leman Russes, if they're in the spearhead, they are objective secured, or scorming, whatever it's called in 8th edition now. Another thing too is you can slot in advisors and auxilia into your detachments, and they do not deactivate your doctrine ability because they aren't all the same keyword. Because stuff like engine seers and priests and crusaders and your commissars and your bulgrons and your ogrons aren't going to have those keywords. So they made that example right there. Some stuff about match play command squads that was in an earlier FAQ. If you've been keeping up with Guard, you kind of already know that. Then we got the doctrines right here. You can kind of see my notes. Valhallan's definitely worth talking about. Catachan's worth talking about. Cadian's worth talking about. Tallarn, definitely worth talking about. We're going to talk about all of those when we start breaking down a couple of ideas for armies. Stratagems. There's actually a meager amount of stratagems. I don't want to say meager. I just want to say not as many as maybe some of the other books. There's 8. There's 7. That's 15. And another what appears to be 8, so 25. And then of those 25, you're looking at 8 of them are the regiments back here. And you can kind of see the ones I picked are definitely worth talking about. Now, some of these are not going to come into play when we talk about some of the army stuff, so let's just go over them right now. Let's talk about, first off, Crush Them. Pop this on a vehicle for 1 command point, and it's hitting on 2 up. Can you say Baneblade chassis? Adamantium tracks, that will literally take out flanks. It's bananas good. I was doing it back when 8th edition started with the Shadow Sword. Austin told me, he's like, yo, assault this. And I'm like, why? And he's like, just do it. And I looked and I was like, oh my god, Adamantium tracks are so good. So good. Keep that in mind right there, and it's about to get better. You can do a command tank kind of thing. If you're taking a lot of infantry and you want to splash in a few command tanks, you can do that. You're allowed to extend your leadership from them. And then I think this one over here allows you to extend and issue orders out of a Chimera, counting as if you had a Voxcaster. But remember, you gotta have a Voxcaster in the squad to receive it too. So I'm not sure if people are taking those, but it might be worth it. Either way, it's just something to be aware of. The Inspired Tactics for 1 command point allows you to issue an additional order, which could come in handy for sure. Defensive Gunners allows a vehicle to fire Overwatch on a 5 or a 6, which definitely could come in handy in a lot of different scenarios. And the Take Cover just gives you an arbitrary +1 saving throw to any of your units. And okay, this is the funny part, because according to Stratagems, which we talked about earlier, excluding auxiliary support detachments. So again, you're not allowed to place stratagems on anything that is just an auxiliary. Excuse me. You do not unlock stratagems for this for this keyword. These you do not unlock if you just take an auxiliary detachment. So like for Death Guard, or let's say for instance you're taking a Chaos Space Marine army and you take Mortarion as an auxiliary support detachment by himself, remember that's -1 command point, then your Chaos Space Marine army did not just unlock Death Guard stratagems to play on Mortarion. Same here, if you're just taking a Shadow Sword to throw in, I don't know, an Imperial army or something like that, you did not unlock Astra Militarium stratagems to play on your army. However, if you do have an Astra Militarium detachment, full-on detachment, normal detachment outside of auxiliary, then, excuse me, an auxiliary support isn't just limited to Lord of War. It's just what people normally take it for. So, apologize for that misspeak right there. If you just take an Astra Militarium detachment, like your battalion or, you know, whatever, then you unlock these stratagems. But look at this. Take Cover is not keyed to any particular keyword or faction. So if you have an Imperial army or a Space Marine detachment in your Battleforged army, I think theoretically, per the FAQ that Games Workshop pointed out for the Death Guard, this just says add 1 to saving throws you make for a unit as long as you play this when your opponent selects one of your units as a target. So theoretically, if you have an Imperial army and it contains a different faction, a detachment, and you have followed all the rules, I think you could play this on them. So that's worth talking about. That's really interesting. That might come up. Or I might just be completely wrong, but regardless, it's worth mentioning. Vengeance for Cadia is pretty cool because you can reroll all failed to hit and wound rolls for models in this unit that target a Chaos keyword faction for the rest of the phase. And seeing as how Chaos is doing so well out there right now, that one's definitely worth mentioning. We're going to talk about the Cadian Stratagem, we're going to talk about the Valhallan Stratagem, we're going to talk about the Tallarn Stratagem, so we are moving forward. Psychana Discipline, the only ones really worth talking about, I feel like, are number 3 for 6 Warp Charge, 12-inch range. You get to add 1 to a unit saving throw. Hey, that's a great combo with that stratagem, right? And then Night Shroud, which is a Warp Charge of 6. You get to basically do the Raven Guard ability, where you cannot target the chosen unit, or if you target it, it's -1 to target it. Heirlooms, or relics, so to speak, for the army. There's some really interesting play in here. A lot of these are situational, and we're going to talk about the Mark 45 bolt pistol that I think is definitely worth it for the Valhallans, but some of the other ones really aren't even worth talking about, to be quite honest. But the Laurels of Command and the Aquila, the Curvav's Aquila, I definitely think will make its way into a lot of armies. Remember, if you're going to take 2, you got to pay 1 command point, because you get 1 for freezies, and to get another one, you have to pay 1 command. So the Laurels of Command, you give it to an officer with a Voice of Command ability only. Roll a dice each time the bearer issues an order to a friendly regiment unit within 6 inches of them. And by the way, another important distinction for issuing orders, you have to issue them within 6 inches, and it has to be same keyword regiment to same keyword regiment. It's done during the shooting phase, and also you do not have to resolve it right then and there. Like you used to, you have to pick something and then you have to resolve the ability right then and there. You don't have to do that, you just have to say, hey, I'm doing this, this, and this. Boom, go for it. The Curvav's Aquila is pretty good. It's officers only. Each time your opponent uses a stratagem, roll a d6. On a 5+, you gain 1 command point back. So when your opponent plays stuff on a 5-up, you get it back. When you play stuff, as long as you have an officer with an order still on the table, you can, wait a minute. Oh, that's the, okay. So that's the double up order one, which is pretty good. I was thinking, where's the one that there's one where you issue an order and you could get it back. Maybe it's a Warlord trait. It is a Warlord trait. Okay. So anyways, I knew it was good for something. So you can double up on your issuing orders with this relic right here. There's also a Warlord trait. The Cadians can do it. This Aquila, like I said, allows you to get command points back. Now you figure most people have 7 or 8 command points in their army. Say you both do. Well, say your opponent does. Say they have a 7. So chances of you getting 1 command point back per game are probably, worth taking if you don't have a specialized thing over here either. However, if they're going heavy on stratagems, say they have 10, you might get 2 command points back, and that's pretty huge. When you pair it up with the Grand Strategist right here, every time you spend command points on a 5-up, you get it refunded. So say you take 8, now you're up to 16, you'll probably get 3 command points back, which would allow you to play 3 additional abilities, or reroll 3 dice, assuming they're 1 command point abilities. I think it's pretty good, and I think for the ability to just arbitrarily pick a Warlord trait, unless you're taking a named character right here, as it keys in, you have to take the specific one over here. Like for instance, Pask will have to take the Cadian one, which gives him that ability whenever he issues a Warlord or a tank or a tank order on a 4-up, can affect an additional Cadian unit of the same type within the Warlord. So, if you're like striking Shroud, shoot and pop smoke, then it would duplicate and go out to a different tank, which is kind of neat to see. Yarick is locked into the Master Command one right here. Out of all of these, I think that's probably the best one, depending on what you're trying to do. Generally, I think that is the best one. And then Tallarn, Warlord trait, I think is probably the only one really worth talking about. Your Warlord and all friendly Tallarn units within 6 inch can charge even if they fell back that turn. Now that's huge. It's just huge, because Tallarn are quite possibly the sleeper hit of this Codex. and we'll talk more about that here in a second, because I think we pretty much made it through everything. There's a point value section and your ranged weapon section if you need to pause it and check out some things. A lot has changed, but you probably already heard it from another video, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now let's talk about what is good, what I think is good in this codex and why, and how they would function on the tabletop and some army ideas. Alright, so first up, let's talk about Cadia. So Cadia has some really interesting play, and I think a lot of people are going to lock onto it really quick because of Pask. And Pask is just funsies. He can do cool things. He still has all his abilities he had before, but the emergency or the plasma event thing is dope now because you don't just blow up. You only take a mortal wound for each one you rolled. On the plasma scene right there, if it fires a supercharged plasma cannon, which are going to be in your side sponsons. So he's pretty cool. His trait is the 4-up, issue the duplicate order that we just talked about. Also, it appears that he can cast orders on himself now, which is pretty cool as well. Now, the special stuff that makes Cadia what it is of course its orders, where you can reroll the number of turret weapons. I think it's 1d6. Let's take a look at it. It's in the front of the book. When determining the number of attacks an ordered model can make with their turret weapons, as described in the Grinding Advance ability above, they can also, for their Doctrine, reroll ones to shoot for their Doctrines right here. If they stand still, yeah, reroll rolls a 1 in a shooting phase of units with this Doctrine if they did not move in the previous phase. And if infantry does the same thing with take aim, now they reroll all failed hits instead of just ones, which is good for both infantry and of course tanks. Then on their stratagem, the stratagem itself that's key to their doctrines is the overlapping fields of fire, which could see a lot of play. This is pretty cool because if you inflict an unsaved wound on an enemy unit in the shooting phase, you get to add 1 to hit rolls for every other Cadian units in your army that target the same enemy unit. So perhaps it's a good strategy, or I would think it's a good strategy, to have a heavy hitting something or other. You should have multiple heavy hitters, or kill conditions, so to speak, to borrow a term from Magic, in your army list at all times, so as if you don't go first, you're probably going to lose one of them right off the bat. And then you have the redundancy. Like, for instance, I like Shadow Swords. I also like Tank Commanders. Both of them are really good. Shadow Sword can take a lot of firepower, Tank Commander can't. But chances are they're both going to be pretty resilient in and of itself, and it's going to take a lot of firepower to burn them down. However, Cadia, if you have something that can target one of your enemy's kill conditions, just get 1 wound through on it, you're going to shoot the rest of your army at it anyway, so you might as well get the force multiplier of adding 1 to hit rolls. You know what I mean? So I think that's pretty good and definitely worth taking and worth thinking about it. I don't think it's worth talking about any of their relics or any of their warlord traits. To be quite honest, they're okay, but they're negligible. You're not going to see them help you in a lot of different conditions. Now, as far as the typical army list goes at 2K, if you are a veteran of Long War, you've probably seen the battle report already with 2 Supreme Command detachments of 5 tanks each, which were hilarious to watch, just play each other. That would be good for Cadian as well. Or what you could do is, I mean, by 5 tanks, I mean Leman Russes, of course. They're, you know, when you think about it, they're all roughly 150 points. There's a couple of different ways to run them. I can kind of show you some notes right here on some different ways that you can kind of kit them out. We found that the Exterminator autocannon is great because you don't have to rely on any strategies or anything like that, because it's just 4 shots, right? Twin linked, which is pretty cool. Packing into plasmas on the side definitely do the Lord's work as well. Here's some tank commanders, so they're going to be around 250. Pask is also around, actually I think Pask is right around upper 240s. Then when you start piling in your Leman Russes, depending on how you kit them out, they're all going to be upwards of 175 to 200. So you can definitely get in 2K 10 Leman Russ battle tanks. You could sub out 2 of those battle tanks, or you know, maybe 1 tank commander, and throw in a Shadow Sword. Now, I guess I should probably make the distinction that these detachments, these would be supreme, or excuse me, these would be the heavy support detachments, which also make them scoring, which is, you know, convenient. You could even take, instead of doing the heavy support one, you could switch it up and you could take 5 tanks in Supreme Command, all tank commanders, because they can order each other now. That also unlocks a Lord of War, which allows you to play stratagems and things like that, or excuse me, to get the Doctrine as well. And you would still have, if you're only taking 5 tanks, they're all roughly 250 points. That's roughly a G. A Lord of War, say a Shadow Sword, a Baneblade chassis, that's roughly 500 points, 1500 points. So you still have 500 points to tinker around with. Conscript platoon is only, or excuse me, 30 conscripts is only 90 points. So you could get a couple of those in there to screen your stuff. You can tinker around with some commissars. They're 30 points, give or take. There's a lot of different play you have right there as well. You could, of course, sideboard in Pask, because he's, like I said, he's a, I want to say he's 247, depending on how you kit him out. He can be expensive, so don't sink a bunch of points into him. Another list would easily be Pask and 3 Russes in a Spearhead, because you do have to take, actually, I'm not sure if you have to take 1 HQ in a Spear, and I don't think you do in a heavy support, but you could. It is there, so you could take him and a Spearhead. You could take a battalion with a company command squad, some Primaris, so, 3 conscript blobs, 2 commissars, of course, and some Chimeras for your command squad. Of course, command squads are great with plasma. Then you could take a Supreme Command with some more Psychers, because you need that HQ slot. You need to fill a couple of those, an Astra to help you get extra hits on different things, and maybe like a Shadow Sword chassis right there, because that, or a Baneblade chassis, because that would unlock your Lord of War, which would benefit from things. All of that is 2k points in the same list, believe it or not, and gives you access to cool psychic abilities now, where you can get +1 to hit, -1 to hit, or excuse me, +1 save, -1 to hit. Remember the stratagem, you get the additional +1 you know, armor save, so you can have Shadow Swords rocking a 2-up save, -1 to hit if you don't go first. You know, there's, or even Pask, you know, or you could play the stratagem on one, make them both really good, make them both 2-up saves, make one of them -1 to hit, whichever one you think they're going to go after. You know, there's a lot of play there. It's a good, solid, well-rounded list with solid doctrines, solid orders that anybody can play. And there's not much thinking. You just put your tanks on the table, push them forward, and go pew, 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 pew. And I think that's pretty fun. Another thing to talk about would be the Valhallans. I think the Valhallans, point for point, are going to give you probably the most robust resiliency on the tabletop. Now, they're not, you know, everything's pretty much the same offensive-wise, depending on a combination of stratagem and orders you play on it, except for Catachans, because they can all your infantry can be +1 strength, which we're going to talk about too. So their order is shoot at units that are within 1 inch of the enemy. They themselves, you cannot play that on something that is within 1 inch of the enemy. So all that's saying is, if you're up in assault, you can play something on something else in your squad that can shoot those dudes right there, and on a 1 to hit, they shoot your friendlies right here, because, you know, it's danger close, stuff's gonna happen. But it's Valhalla, so they don't care, which makes a lot of sense. So you can shoot up your conscript platoons to hit things, and then you're gonna be able to, you know, life is cheap. You're just going to be able to lock down the enemy stuff. Well, not really, because they can fall back and still shoot or still do things. But when you're running up, hitting the enemy, forcing them to either withdraw, and then, or if they know if they stay, they can get shot. Like there's no play here. You're just buying time. So if they fall back, you just charge in again, and then they gotta fall back again, and then you gotta charge in again, and then they fall back again, and there's only so much tabletop. You know what I mean? Like, you literally put a line of dudes across the table, your opponent has to deal with them. Either they hit them, they don't kill them all, and then they have to fall back, or they hit them, they kill them all, but it took them a turn, and you were able to pick apart some other stuff. And even if it took them a turn, now you're allowed to shoot them. That seems good. Like, that's just good play. Some other cool stuff about Valhallans is the Doctrine. They basically kind of have I would say a Commissar Light ability here, right? Where, let's see. So if they fail a morale test, which they could, because let's face it, your conscripts are leadership 4, your infantry are leadership 6, and your veterans are leadership 7, whatever. So if you have to take a morale test, you're probably gonna fail. However, they would only lose half. And when you're talking, you know, that they would from the fail, I mean, that seems pretty good. But there's also a neat relic, which we talked about, the bolt pistol, which has the same effect as if you fail a morale check, you only lose 1 dude. Same thing as a commissar. So there's some interesting play on abilities and things that you can get to try to just, you know, preserve all of your dudes in general. The stratagem is actually pretty good too. Who cares if you lose, guys? When you can get more again, as long as you have some command points at your disposal, well, you can send in the next wave. If an infantry squad has been completely wiped out, excluding characters and infantry squads that have used the combined squadrons stratagem, well, you can just set them back up in your deployment zone within 6 inches of the edge of either battlefield or any of the battlefield sides and more than 9 inches from the enemy. Of course, yes, they have to walk across the table, but what that's going to do is like it's going to protect your back edge or your backfield even, or allow you to keep scoring things that are in your backfield right there. And kind of mess with the enemy as well. If somebody gets in behind you in your backfield, well, just, you know, oh, I lost the squad. Oh, I guess they set up next turn. Oh, there's 30 dudes making 3 concentric rings around you guys that are in my battlefield, or in my backfield. Okay, have fun with that. That's going to buy me at least 2 turns. Maybe the game's over by then. Thanks for hanging out. And we all know how scoring works. The more models you have within a certain range, whether they're in combat or not in combat, are going to score you that objective. So I feel like that's a win-win right there, depending on what, you know, you bring back infantry or conscript wise right there. So those are the big things you need to learn, or you need to worry about for, or be aware of as far as Valhallans go. Let me make sure. Okay, so we talked about the Laurels of Command. That's pretty cool, where you can issue the same orders, which is great for infantry because they can do the thing where they can advance and shoot. They can advance twice. They can get, you know, additions to shooting. You can protect your infantry with the stratagems, psychers. You know, there's all sorts of play here to try to mitigate the amount of wounds you take, but ultimately you're going to take wounds, guys are going to die, but you just need to keep them from dying and losing too much in the morale phase. Some army lists to think about would be, I really only kind of put one list together. So it would be a battalion with a couple of command squads. It has to, well, you could do 1 or 2. You could sub out the psyker if you didn't like it. So command squad with plasma, on foot. You actually could probably get 2 of them with the price of the Chimera. So whatever your taste is right there. You don't want to put vehicles in unless you are taking other vehicles, because you put a command Chimera in there and it's the only piece of armor on the board, your opponent's going to shoot it. Come on, let's be real. A primary psyker, 3 blobs of conscripts, so 90 points, 90 conscripts. Again, a lot of these lists have a lot of conscripts. Remember, they can only be affected by orders on a 4-up now, but they are good for their points. Now, there's no commissars in here to babysit them because the what is it? Oh, and something else we didn't talk about as far as the models running away. They only lose half the number of fleeing models. Vehicles also count as double wounds for the characteristics being there. So, you know, if you go below say 6 for a Lehman Russ, well, you would have to go below 12 wounds before you hit your point where you start losing your ability, your characteristics start degrading, because they count as double. So that was something that I forgot to mention for the Doctrine. So there is play on having vehicles, and this list actually has vehicles in it. So in addition to the command squad, the psyker, and the conscripts, in a spearhead, you're going to have 5 Lehman Russes, because they also score. Now you could sub that out. You could take a Supreme Command if you wanted, and you could take some Tank Commanders if you wanted. Either way, yeah, there's definitely play there. Supreme Command, take a bunch of psychers, because, you know, dishing out smite is always good, but also having some dudes that could, you know, possibly throw out that +1 save, that -1 to hit is very good too. Also in the Supreme Command was 2 command Russes, Lehman Russes, to order the other Lehman Russes around. And remember, they're going to be a little bit more resilient. They're going to be able to take more damage and things like that. So it's just kind of cool. You could sub out the 2 command Russes to have a Lord of War if you really wanted. Either way, it's still got play. Next regiment to talk about is the mighty, or the notorious, Catachan Devils. These guys, of course, named after the ginormous animal that stalks their planet. Giant predator of the galaxy, which may or may not actually be, I think, maybe that's the Kraken, I forget. Well, anyways, there's something big on that planet, and they hunt them. So the Catachans have some cool stuff. Harker, of course, is a notable character for them. He allows Catachan Doctrine keyword, or Catachan keyword, to reroll ones within 6 inches. Now they've nerfed, or they slightly nerfed his weapon, Payback, which is a heavy bolter. He, you know, he liberated from some of his compatriots to battle the orcs with. It is no longer, I forget what it is, but I think it used to be neg 2. Maybe now it's only neg 1, but it's still 2 damage, I believe. Either way, it's not as big of a deal, but it was on par with some of the larger scale plasma weapons and stuff out there, if I remember correctly. Now, orders wise, they have the Burn 'em Out command, which is you get to reroll the dice for numbers attacked with flamers and heavy flamers. However, the units targeted by models from this unit do not gain any benefits to their saving throws from being in cover. Remember, flamers don't negate cover anymore. There's actually no way to negate cover unless it says they do not get cover. That's just the thing. A lot of math is involved now to negate cover, like a save of, or a damage profile, excuse me, not damage profile, but the AP of neg 3 could be considered ignores cover, because in a lot of cases that means you're not going to get your normal save. So even if you had a plus, that would still take you in a lot of cases to a 6 or higher, so therefore you would not get the benefits of cover, so to speak. So that's just the colloquialism of you know, no cover, but there's actually nothing out there unless it physically says you do not get a cover save, that you do not get a cover save. So flamers don't do that anymore, so that's actually kind of cool to see. Their stratagem is a little bit better as far as, actually we skipped the doctrine. Let's go to the doctrine since we're right here. Their doctrine is brutal strength, which allows all of their infantry to be +1 strength, which is strength 4. Pretty awesome for a guardsman to be strength 4. Now you've got a lot of play, because remember, there's things out there, there's orders that let you just arbitrarily, I believe it's fixed bayonets. They just allow you to fight around the close combat during the shooting phase. And tell you what, if you're strength 4, that's doing some work. Like, even, I don't care, if you're 30 dudes, it's strength 4, you're still doing some work. That's just math. Against 10 Space Marines, something bad's gonna happen to somebody, and it's probably not, in a lot of cases, going to be the infantry unit itself for the Catachans. But I digress. It's just something to be aware of that I think has play, because a lot of folks out there can get those conscripts across the table and into enemy lines, but then they kind of lack ass, so to speak. They have no ass. They have no way to interact and actually carry the day, whereas a +1 strength bonus definitely starts to get them there, for sure. Also, each time a vehicle with this doctrine fires a ranged weapon that makes a random number of attacks, you can reroll one of the dice used to determine the number of attacks made. So that's pretty cool, because it affects all sorts of things. You're going to see a lot of folks with their Basilisks and their Earthshaker carriages and things like that probably going Catachans, possibly. They may switch to Cadians because you just reroll ones into shooting phase regardless. But this one might have a little bit of play because it's going to get you a better average of numbers, which I think is pretty decent right there, and definitely something to talk about. Now, on the stratagem side, their specific stratagem, somewhere here, is Vicious Traps, which isn't that good. I mean, if you assault them in cover, you know, if they're in or wholly within, on a 4-up, the enemy unit suffers D3 and 101. It's worth talking about, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not a game breaker or anything like that, as far as I can tell. These guys would definitely benefit from the 4-up additional order stuff. I don't think they have a very good Warlord trait, if I remember correctly. Heroic intervention and stuff. So not exactly on my list of super dope things, but there's definitely play with them for sure. Now, as far as tactics go, I mean, the +1 strength, definitely able to deal with a lot of threats out there, so you want to be cognizant of that. The double fight phase order is pretty good. And as far as psychics go, you know, +1 save, -1 to hit, you're going to be able to protect these guys a lot more. And they have that advantage of shooting random shots. So like, say, another good thing, and this is probably, you know, just math, like we could just math it out. Like, say you take, you know, another reason that a lot of folks might take the Basilisk over this is a Basilisk is 2d6, or it's you roll 2d6 shots, you take the highest, right? So you roll 2d6 shots, or and you pick out the highest. Now you get to re-roll again. So say you roll 2d6, and you know your average, we'll just go with 7. So you take a 3 and a 4. Let's just say it's a 3 and a 4. You're gonna re-roll the 3, right? So your 3 is now gonna re-roll into what? Yeah, we'll say it's higher. So really, what this is saying is roll 3 dice, pick which one you want, because at this point, your odds are that you're gonna roll high because you rolled low right here. So we'll say it's a 5. So now, which one are you gonna pick? You're gonna pick the 5. So your average, you just went up from an average of 7. You're now averaging 3d6, right? So your average of 7 shots on 2d6 now just went up, and that's huge. That's definitely worth noticing here when you come to that. So anything that fires twice is going to benefit from, you know, the Catachan Doctrine right there, and I believe it's just vehicles, but still, it's still good. As far as the ranged attack die right there. So something to definitely be aware of 100%. Now, as far as the army goes, well, some of the stuff we talked about already, you can take a battalion with a couple Primaris Psychers to get that Psychic Barrier, get that Night Shroud right there, which are both super good. Couple of squads of Conscripts, or if you want to take infantry, go with infantry too, but I mean, max them out, you know. Conscripts can be taken at 30-man blocks. There's no reason not to, 100%. On your spearhead side of things, you could take 3 squadrons of Basilisks, because Basilisks, like I said, are only 100 points. If you don't have access to any of the Forge World stuff, I think the Earthshaker carriers probably got play. But remember, the Basilisk currently, until they FAQ the Earthshaker out of Forge World, is the only one with -3 AP. So that's something to definitely remember right there. That would get you, I think that's only, well, it's 108 points because you have to take the Heavy Bolter in the front. Then you can have a Supreme Command of a command squad with plasmas, or a tank commander, and say 3 Lehman Russ tanks, because you're still re-rolling, even though it's only 1 die for, say, the battle cannon, you still get to re-roll it. So now your average goes from whatever the average on 1 die is, which is, I guess, 3.5, to now 7 for your battle cannon shots. So, I mean, that's just good math. Like, play to your army's strengths when it comes to doctrines, when it comes to orders. That's the way to do it. And a lot of these orders and a lot of these doctrines benefit both vehicles and infantry. So it's a very important distinction and something to definitely remember. Now, I've saved the best for last. The secret sleepers of this book, the Tallarn, the Desert Raiders. Tallarn, of course, home of some of the greatest or largest tank battles the Imperium has ever known at the time of the Horus Heresy, as they squared off against the 4th Legion Iron Warriors. Somewhat successfully / unsuccessfully, they still got their planet. However, it was basically turned to glass and now arid desert, where it was once a lush paradise. But hey, you still got a planet. It's still there. The Iron Warriors left. So it is what it is. As far as their, let's see, special rules, we've got the tank order, which is get around behind them. The ordered model can move 6 inches in this phase, either before or after it shoots, as if it were the movement phase. And it gets better. This does not affect how far the vehicle has moved for the purposes of determining how many times it can fire its turret weapon, as described in the grinding ability above. So, what this says is that if you order a specific tank, now it can go, it's up to 5. And then when you order it, which is in the shooting phase, you can either choose to shoot right then, or perhaps run up, turn a corner, and then shoot, basically giving this tank the old school Eldar battle focus ability, or you can shoot and then dart around the corner to protect that tank from line of sight. It's incredibly synergistic and resourceful. It's really, really good. Like, you want to play this and keep your tank commander near somebody that has a lot of firepower that you're going to need to protect. That's a really good tank order and something to be on the lookout for 100%. Let's see, there is actually a trait as well that we need to talk about for these guys. But before we get there, let's hit up their doctrine. And this quite possibly may be the best of all doctrines in here. And let's read it together, because I had to read this multiple times before I really understood how good this is. Infantry with this doctrine can advance and will shoot any weapon type except heavy weapons. So now they can do their normal movement, roll a die, and still shoot all of their weapons, which you could only do previously with assault weapons suffering a -1 penalty. Speaking of that, when they do so, they do not suffer the usual penalties to hit rolls for assault weapons. Boom! No penalties whatsoever, you just can't fire a heavy weapon. I'm okay with that. Vehicles with this doctrine do not suffer the penalty to their hit rolls for moving and firing heavy weapons. Wow! Do not suffer the penalty to their hit rolls for moving and firing heavy weapons. Here is why that is huge. Because even though Leman Russes have that same ability now, with the grinding advanced ability, it's only for the turret weapons. So if you're moving up to your 5 to get your double shots, which you don't suffer any penalties because that's what it says, but it's only for the turret weapons. If you're firing your las cannons on your side, your plasma cannons on the side, whatever you want on the side, if they're heavy, you're still -1 to hit with those weapons. And your Leman Russes are base ballistic skill 4, I believe. Pretty sure. Let's talk about that. Leman Russ battle tank is ballistic skill 4, yes. Commanders are 3, Pask is 2. Okay, so that's huge. You basically get to drive your tanks around the table if they are Tallarns and just go pew 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 and you don't care. Not only that, but Titanic vehicles in this doctrine advances, it treats all heavy weapons it is equipped with as assault weapons until the end of the turn. E.g., heavy D6 weapons are treated as an assault D6 type weapons. What did you just say to me? Okay, let's break this down for a minute. So, while you can't advance and fire with a normal vehicle, unless there's some sort of crazy special rule, let's talk about Titanic vehicles, because the ones with this doctrine can. So for instance, the way this reads is, if you have a Shadow Sword is a heavy weapon. It fires 3d3 shots, which are incredibly powerful. If you drive your tank and then advance your tank, now all heavy weapons it is equipped with are now assault weapons, which means they can now be shot only with a -1 penalty. You can move and fire. Excuse me, not just move and fire, you can move and advance a Baneblade class vehicle and only suffer a -1 penalty to firing those heavy weapons. It just blows my mind, because you follow that up with an assault from Adamantite Tracks, and then you play a stratagem where you hit on 2-ups in combat, and you just obliterate things off the tabletop. If you see a Tallarn-based Titanic class vehicle that has Adamantite treads, you should literally do nothing else but try to destroy it, because it can single-handedly, with these abilities, destroy most armies, in my opinion. I have seen what a Shadow Sword can do before it can move and fire effectively, and now not only can it move and fire with the new Baneblade class rules, but if you're Tallarn, you can move and advance and fire, and then chances are you're going to hit their lines and assault them with your Baneblade class vehicle, and it's going to do ridiculous amounts of damage. Now granted, you could prevent a lot of things with screens and such and things like that, but smart players are going to play to their strengths and try hopefully not get bogged down with such trickery. But there's always, there's a reaction to everything, of course. But this right here, single-handedly, perhaps the best doctrine and one of the best rules, just for funsies, in 40k, in my opinion. Okay, I think I just spent 5 minutes on that. That's how good I feel like it is. Tactics for these guys. Well, put some tanks, put some infantry on the table, and they just can kind of do whatever they want, is what it seems like. They're the ultimate adaptability. Like, they're the ultimate hunters of the universe. They strike and then they disappear, or they can move super fast and then they're in your grill. Like, and we haven't even got to quite possibly one of the most trickiest things in this book, and that's the ambush special rule. For 3 command points, which I feel like is a steal, you can deploy in ambush at any point in any of your movement phases. Not 1, not 2, but 3 units. 3 units. Could be anything. Could literally be anything. There's no restriction. 3 units. Strike from hiding. Set them up wholly within 7 inches of battlefield edge and more than 9 inches from enemy models. That's anything in your army. That's lines of conscripts to choke people out. That's Leman Russ battle tanks behind enemy lines. That's a freaking shadow sword in front of somebody. Hey, where'd that shadow sword come from? I don't know, but now it's here. Not only that, but that shadow sword, as we know, can now advance and shoot with no penalty. Well, no normal penalty. It's still -1 to hit, as if it was an assault weapon with its heavy weapons. But maybe better yet, it could probably just try to charge, because it'll only be 9 inches away, and you can always play that hit on 2 special rule. I'm not saying that's great for a lot of instances, but I'm just saying, hey, you look back, there's nothing, and you look away, and then boom, there's a shadow sword. I don't even know what to say right now. I love Guard. I was a little taken aback. I've talked about it before when a lot of the rules changed from their original design and inception in June. So to see rules like this and really kind of get those hobby juices going with all of these tanks and all these infantry blobs and all these combined arms type forces, to borrow a military term and not a 7th edition term, it just really gets me going there. So Tallarn Tactics, or Tallarn Armies for 2K, you can do the stuff that we were talking about already. You know, 5 tank Leman Russ spearheads. You can take 2 of those at 2K. You can do cool stuff like, you know, 4 command tanks in a Supreme Command and take your Baneblade chassis, whatever flavor it might be. It's probably going to be at least 500 points. Then you can take a, you know, I don't know, just a commander or something with perhaps in a Chimera with some plasma gunners, a whole command squad, Primaris, some conscript blobs, some commissars to protect them, of course, because you're going to need them, and then just maybe an arbitrary Leman Russ. You'll have some points left over. Not really a point to having a lot of stuff that stands still, I think, in this army, like artilleries and things, because you're going to just be moving your tanks all over the place, just doing whatever, and your infantry as well. So I feel like having static stuff, it's kind of like White Scars being static. You know, that's not really their thing. Oh, gosh, I forgot quite possibly one of the things that's just ridiculous in here, and that's their Warlord trait. Their Warlord trait for Tallarn says if their Warlord is within, their Warlord or anybody within 6 inches can fall back and re-assault. They can literally fall back and then re-assault again. So you can hit people with lines of infantry, fall back for them to get shot, because remember, you don't have that cool Valhallan ability, and then just charge right back in with the same units. The Warlord and any friendly Tallarn units within 6 inches of them. You could do the same thing with Leman Russes. Might not be as cool or as effective, but hey, I mean, technically it applies to a Shadow Sword as well, or a Baneblade chassis, which we've talked about how good those are in Assault a couple of times. I didn't give you specifics, but I just run the math on adamantite tracks. So those are some great guidelines. Sorry I droned on. I am really excited about this book. I think, again, this is probably one of the best, if not the best, codex we've seen thus far. It's going to have far-reaching implications. A lot of things went down, some things went up in price, but for the most part, a lot of the lists out there that are you're currently seeing at the top tables are probably going to stay about the same, in my opinion, from both a points perspective and a tactics perspective. a lot to do with conscripts and things. If not anything, they got better because of the new doctrines and traits and orders as well. So that's it for this one. Thanks for hanging in there, folks. Please leave your comments because this is a very exciting time for the Imperium. This book is dope. I cannot say enough good things about it. I've enjoyed doing the research on this. Obviously, if I misspoke, please leave it in the comments. If you like these type of features, please subscribe to the channel here. Turn on notifications so you can be the very first to like and comment on these videos. And of course, head on over to longwar.net, home of the 8th edition battle reports for exclusive content, early access videos, and more. Become a veteran of the Long War today.